The blind mafia boss lay motionless in the gold-covered room, his lifeless eyes facing the endless darkness. Meanwhile, the maid's little daughter knelt beside him, her hands trembling, holding something tiny black that she had just pulled out of his eye. "Lily, what have you done?" The butler choked out, frozen in terror. Heavy footsteps tore through the silence of the mansion. Mr. Vincent Moretti, the powerful mafia boss whose money could buy almost anything, stormed into the room, his face pale with horror. "What happened to the boss?" he roared, rushing forward. The girl's mother shook violently, tears spilling down her face as she looked up. "I swear, she did not hurt him. I only let her try to help." "Help," Vincent thundered, his voice shaking the grand hall. "You and your child dared to touch the boss. Dared to come near him without my order." The little girl slowly opened her palm. Inside was something no one had ever seen. A strange black object, wet, slimy, still twitching under the chandelier light. Every servant in the room stepped back at once, their faces drained of blood. The air turned solid, silent, heavy enough to suffocate. Then a hoarse sound suddenly ripped through it all. Light. The voice came from the boss himself, the man who had been blind for years, the man whom thousands of famous doctors had failed to cure, the man who had not seen anyone's face again for so long. In that moment, no one dared breathe. Even Vincent stood frozen in place. And that was when everyone realized the maid's daughter had just done the impossible. Dear viewers, this is a heart-stopping story about power, despair, and a miracle that money could never buy. Stay until the very end, because what happens next will make your heart tremble and remind you that sometimes the one who saves us is the smallest person in the room. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, share the video, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss another emotional story. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to reflect on the quiet power of kindness, especially when no one else chooses to show it. Share your thoughts in the comments and tell us where you're watching from. Which city and country are you in, and what time is it there right now? It's always amazing to see how stories like this connect people from all over the world. Is it United States, London, maybe Canada, Jamaica, South Africa, or anywhere we want to know? And tell us what you learned at the end of this video. If moments like this remind you of the beauty of humanity, please like the video and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss more powerful stories that celebrate compassion, courage, and the simple acts of kindness that can change a person. Subscribe to our channel. Life. The Chicago penthouse stood silent high above the glittering skyline, its floor-to-ceiling windows framing the distant lights of the city like cold stars that could never be touched. Vincent Russo, a fair-skinned American man in his late 40s, sat motionless in a wide leather armchair, his broad shoulders tense beneath a tailored black shirt. His once sharp blue eyes stared into nothing, veiled by permanent darkness. The doctors had called it irreversible after the ambush years ago. Thousands of specialists, the best money could buy, had failed. Now the world existed only in sound touch and the gnawing guilt that never left his chest. Vincent Russo was a powerful mafia boss who had built an empire of legitimate construction firms and exclusive nightclubs across Chicago, all while keeping the shadows of his other dealings carefully hidden. He commanded respect and fear in equal measure. Yet, in the quiet hours when the grandfather clock in the corner ticked steadily like a heartbeat, he could no longer see remorse clawed at him. He had lost so much to the life he chose: friends, trust, and the chance to be something softer than the man who ruled with iron will. The emptiness inside him felt heavier than any rival's threat. Later that night, on the windswept streets of Chicago's South Side, the cold bit deep. Sarah Harper huddled in the doorway of an abandoned building, her thin coat doing little against the gusts that howled between cracked concrete walls. She was a young American woman in her late 20s, once hopeful, now worn down to bone in quiet desperation. Her face was pale and drawn cheeks hollow from months of barely eating. Sleep had become a luxury she could not afford. Nights blurred into one long shiver as she clutched a small threadbare blanket around her shoulders. Sarah had lost everything in the cruelest ways. Eviction after eviction, jobs that vanished without warning, and a system that seemed designed to keep people like her pinned down. She had no family left to turn to. Her hands, once steady, now trembled from hunger and exhaustion. The wind carried the distant sound of sirens and laughter from warmer places she would never reach. She pressed her forehead against her knees and whispered a soft prayer, her voice timid and breaking. Just one more night, please. The next morning brought no mercy. Sarah stood in line at a crowded shelter, her malnourished frame barely holding her upright. The staff turned her away when the beds filled. "Sorry, miss. Come back earlier next time." The words landed like stones. She walked the streets in a dazed confusion and fear twisting inside her. Every step sent sharp pain through her blistered feet. She felt dizzy, the world tilting as numbness spread through her limbs. Passersby glanced away, unwilling to see the depth of her humiliation. Weeks later, the unfairness only deepened. A sudden rainstorm caught her outside a closed soup kitchen. She had waited hours in the cold, only to learn the doors would not open that day due to funding issues. Soaked and shaking, Sarah curled beneath an overpass, her teeth chattering. The thin fabric of her dress clung to her skin. She thought of the child she had once dreamed of raising in safety, a dream that now felt like a cruel joke. Hot tears mixed with the rain. Her inner world tore violently between fierce hope that refused to die and the crushing weight of powerlessness. Vincent's world shifted one stormy evening when his driver took a wrong turn into the south side, during a tense evasion from rival scouts. The car slowed near the overpass. Vincent, blind but attuned to every change in sound, heard a faint sob carried on the wind. Something in that broken sound pierced the armor around his heart. "Stop the car," he ordered. His deep voice steady, yet edged with an emotion he could not name. His men hesitated. This was not their territory. Rivals controlled these blocks. But Vincent's tone left no room for argument. They found Sarah slumped against the concrete pillar, barely conscious, her lips blue from the cold. When one of the men gently lifted her, she stirred with a soft, fearful gasp. "Please, don't hurt me," she whispered, her voice, timid and polite, cracked from disorientation. Her body felt impossibly light in their arms, every rib visible beneath damp clothes. The sight, described to Vincent in hushed tones, struck him like a physical blow. In the warm interior of the luxury sedan, Sarah woke slowly. The soft leather seats and faint scent of expensive cologne disoriented her further. She sat up with a start, heart pounding in terror. "Where am I? Who are you?" Her words came out shaky, guarded yet curious despite the fear. Vincent sat across from her, his fair-skinned face calm, though inside a storm raged. He could not see her, but he heard the exhaustion in every breath, the quiet dignity fighting against total collapse. A surge of fierce protectiveness flooded him, mixed with sudden, overwhelming compassion. This woman so destitute and powerless reminded him of every vulnerable soul his world had ignored, including the child he had never known, but whose absence haunted him. "You're safe now," Vincent said gently, his voice low and reassuring. "No one will harm you. My name is Vincent Russo. We're taking you somewhere warm." Sarah stared at him, confusion swirling with shock, a powerful man offering help. She felt dizzy again, numbness giving way to trembling. Part of her wanted to bolt, but another part, buried deep, felt the first fragile spark of hope. She lowered her eyes. "Thank you, sir," she murmured softly, her tone polite and timid, appropriate for speaking to someone who carried such authority. As the car moved through the city, Vincent's inner turmoil intensified. Guilt gnawed at him. How many nights had he sat in comfort while people suffered in the shadows he helped create? Remorse consumed him, violent in its quiet way, tearing at the man who had built walls to survive. Yet beneath it bloomed something deeper, an instant passionate resolve to protect this woman. Not romance, but a fierce paternal instinct, as if she were the child he had failed to shield long ago. His heart ached with the weight of responsibility. The following days brought more unjust blows for Sarah. Even in temporary safety at a discreet safe house arranged by Vincent's people, old fears lingered. She learned that her few remaining belongings had been stolen from the street. The news left her numb, sitting motionless for hours, inner torment ripping through her like a silent scream. She felt humiliated by her own weakness, malnourished body still recovering sleep interrupted by nightmares of endless cold nights. Vincent visited often, his powerful presence filling the room. He arranged hot meals, warm clothes, and medical care. Each time he spoke to her, his voice carried quiet compassion. "You don't have to be afraid anymore," he would say. Sarah's responses remained soft and guarded at first. "I don't understand why you're helping me," she admitted one evening, her voice trembling with anxiety and curiosity. "People like me, we're invisible." The words hung heavy, drawing tears from anyone listening. One tense afternoon danger struck without warning. Rival scouts had tracked the car from that stormy night. As Sarah stepped outside for fresh air under protection, a black SUV screeched around the corner. Shouts echoed. Vincent's men moved quickly, but the confrontation turned sharp and unexpected on the narrow street. No shots fired in excess, yet the air crackled with threat, as rival voices demanded answers about Vincent's sudden interest in some street woman. Vincent, guided by sound, stepped forward with commanding calm. "She is under my protection. Walk away." The rivals retreated, but the message was clear his world had noticed. Sarah witnessed it from a distance, horror and fear freezing her in place. She felt dizzy balance, nearly lost as the scene unfolded. Later that night, back in safety, she broke down. "I bring trouble wherever I go," she whispered, voice soft and broken. Vincent sat nearby, his fair-skinned face etched with deep lines of remorse. Inside, violent conflict raged. Protecting her meant risking his empire, yet abandoning her felt like repeating every past failure. The gnawing guilt intensified into something almost unbearable. He felt an overwhelming surge of love in the purest sense, the fierce protective love of a father for a lost child finally found. Weeks passed in this fragile new reality. Sarah's health slowly improved with regular meals and rest, yet the emotional scars ran deep. She remained at times desperate in memory, powerless against the system that had nearly destroyed her. Other moments brought confusion and shock at Vincent's unwavering kindness. She would stare at the simple but clean clothes he provided, feeling the stark gap between her old life of wind-filled nights and this unexpected shelter. Vincent's inner world grew more turbulent. Each quiet conversation with Sarah deepened his emotional bond. He saw in her resilience the child he wished he could have raised. His remorse became a constant companion, pushing him to question the violence and isolation of his life. "I have spent years building walls," he confided, one quiet evening, voice thick with feeling. "But hearing your story, it makes me want to tear them down for someone who deserves better." Sarah listened, her timid voice replying with growing trust. "You don't know what it means to someone like me, to be seen." In those condensed moments of stillness, when the room held only the sound of breathing and distant city hum, their connection strengthened around compassion and responsibility. No romance touched their words, only the slow healing of a powerful man offering protection to a vulnerable soul who had endured too much. Yet the rivals did not rest. Another street confrontation erupted days later near a quiet park where Sarah had begun to walk under escort. Voices rose sharply. Accusations flew about territory and weakness. Vincent arrived swiftly, his presence alone shifting the balance. He spoke with measured authority, shielding Sarah behind him. She felt intense curiosity mixed with fear, her heart pounding as she watched this wealthy, powerful man risk himself for her. The unfairness of her past life flashed before her eyes, tearing at her insides once more. Why her? Why now? In the aftermath, back in the penthouse, where Vincent eventually brought her for greater security, Sarah stood by the tall windows, gazing at the lights she had once only dreamed of. Dizziness and numbness returned briefly as overwhelming emotions surged. She felt horror at the dangers she had pulled him into, anxiety about what came next, and a deep, disorienting gratitude. Vincent stood nearby, listening to her soft footsteps. His heart swelled with passionate intensity. This destitute woman, so pitiful in her thin, sleep-deprived state, had awakened in him a father's fierce love and responsibility. He would protect her. He would give her the safety and dignity stolen for so long. The inner turmoil in both their hearts continued to build. Sarah's world, once reduced to humiliating survival, now held confusing flickers of hope that felt almost too painful to trust. Vincent's remorse and guilt clashed violently with the new purpose blooming inside him. The grandfather clock ticked on marking time in a home that was beginning slowly to feel less empty. And so the story of protection and quiet healing began in the heart of Chicago, where shadows of poverty met the weight of power, and one act of compassion threatened to change everything. Later that night, the Chicago penthouse glowed with soft, understated luxury. Crystal chandeliers cast gentle light across marble floors and dark wood paneling. Expensive leather furniture and original American landscape paintings lined the walls, while the tall grandfather clock stood sentinel in the corner, its steady ticking the only sound breaking the heavy silence. Vincent Russo moved through the spacious rooms with practiced confidence, his fair-skinned face set in quiet determination. Servants had prepared a warm guest suite on the lower floor, stocked with fresh linens, thick quilts, reminiscent of traditional American family heirlooms, and a small tray of homemade apple pie, still warm from the kitchen. The scent of cinnamon and butter filled the air, a simple comfort that contrasted sharply with the cold world outside. Vincent's heart churned with violent intensity. The image his men had described, the thin, malnourished woman shivering in the rain, refused to leave him. Gnawing remorse clawed deeper than ever. He had spent years building power and wealth. Yet how many souls like hers had he passed by without a second thought? The conflict inside him raged, the ruthless mafia boss who could not afford weakness versus the man suddenly overwhelmed by a fierce, protective love that felt almost paternal in its burning intensity. From the very first moment he heard her timid voice in the car, something had ignited in him an overwhelming surge of responsibility and compassion that threatened to tear his carefully constructed world apart. Next morning, Sarah Harper woke in the soft bed, her thin body still aching from months of hardship. She sat up slowly, confusion clouding her eyes. The room felt impossibly warm and clean. Thick curtains blocked the bright Chicago sunlight, and a soft robe had been laid out for her. Her malnourished frame, marked by visible ribs and hollow cheeks, looked even more fragile against the luxurious bedding. Sleep had come in fits, interrupted by old fears. She touched the clean fabric with trembling fingers, a mix of gratitude and deep disorientation washing over her. Dizziness returned as she stood, her balance unsteady from long nights of hunger and cold wind. "This can't be real," she whispered to herself, her voice soft and timid. She found a note on the nightstand, written in neat handwriting. "Take your time. Breakfast is waiting whenever you are ready. You are safe here." Sarah's heart pounded with anxiety and heightened curiosity. Who was this powerful man who had pulled her from the streets? Fear lingered. What if this kindness came with a hidden price? Yet beneath the suspicion, a fragile spark of trust began to flicker. She dressed in the simple but high-quality clothes provided, a soft sweater and warm pants that felt foreign against her skin after so many threadbare layers. Her steps were hesitant as she made her way to the dining area. Vincent was already there, seated at the long table with a cup of coffee. He turned his head toward the sound of her approach, his blue eyes unseeing but his presence commanding. "Good morning, Sarah," he said gently, his deep voice carrying quiet warmth. "Please sit. Eat as much as you like." Sarah hesitated, her guarded nature making her pause. "Thank you, sir," she replied politely, her tone timid and appropriate for addressing someone older and far more powerful. She sat carefully, eyes wide with shock at the spread before her: fresh fruit, warm toast eggs, and that same apple pie. Tears stung her eyes as she took the first bite. The flavors exploded on her tongue after so long surviving on scraps. The disparity hit her hard here. She was once enduring humiliating nights under overpasses, now surrounded by wealth that could have fed entire blocks of the South Side. As she ate, Vincent listened intently. He asked gentle questions about her life, never pressing too hard. Sarah spoke softly, her voice breaking at times. She described the absurdly unfair events that had stripped her bare jobs, lost without reason. Shelters turning her away when beds ran out, nights when the wind cut through her thin coat like knives. Each memory tore at her inner world with violent force. She felt numb, recalling the cold, sleep-deprived nights when she had curled into herself, powerless and desperate. "I didn't think anyone would ever see me," she admitted, her words laced with quiet torment. Vincent's remorse burned hotter. Inside, a storm of guilt and compassion clashed violently. This destitute woman, so pitiful in her extreme poverty, had awakened in him a love that was pure and fierce, the protective love of a father for a child who had suffered too much alone. He wanted nothing more than to shield her from every future harm. Weeks later, Sarah had begun to settle into the routine of the penthouse. Her body was slowly regaining strength with regular meals and rest, yet the emotional scars remained raw. She still moved with timid caution, fearful that this safety might vanish as suddenly as it had appeared. One afternoon, while exploring the quieter areas of the home, she heard children's voices drifting from a small sitting room. Curiosity overcame her hesitation. She peeked inside and saw two children playing quietly with simple toys, a well-worn baseball glove, and a few colorful blocks. The girl was about 10 years old, with bright eyes and a gentle smile. She introduced herself as Emma. The boy, her loyal best friend Tommy, was the same age, a bit more reserved, his clothes clean, but clearly from simpler means. Both children came from the South Side, brought occasionally by Sarah's distant cousin who worked in Vincent's household staff. They had been allowed to visit the penthouse for short supervised times, a small mercy Vincent had quietly arranged to bring some normalcy to the vast empty space. Sarah knelt beside them, her voice soft and polite. "Hello, sweethearts. What are you playing?" Emma looked up with innocent warmth. "We're pretending it's a baseball game at Wrigley Field. Want to join?" Tommy watched Sarah with cautious eyes at first, but soon warmed when she smiled. For the first time in months, Sarah felt a genuine, condensed moment of emotional stillness. The children's laughter was like a balm to her tormented heart. She helped them arrange the toys, her thin hands still showing signs of past malnutrition. In those quiet minutes, the humiliating memories of her poverty faded, slightly replaced by a burning attachment to this unexpected kindness. Vincent listened from the doorway, unseen but deeply moved. The sound of Sarah's gentle voice interacting with the children intensified the tearing inside him. Remorse gnawed relentlessly. He had built this empire of wealth and power, yet his own life lacked the simple joy these children brought so effortlessly. His love for Sarah deepened into something passionate and intense, Not romantic, but a profound fatherly urge to protect and heal her, to give her the family and security she had never known. The conflict raged violently. The mafia boss, who could not show weakness, versus the man whose heart now burned with responsibility for this vulnerable woman and the innocent children who had entered his world. Later that night, danger returned without warning. Rival factions had grown bolder after the earlier street encounter. As Vincent's car returned from a late meeting, an unexpected confrontation erupted on a quiet side street. Two rival vehicles blocked the way. Voices rose in tense negotiation, bold accusations about territory and perceived softness. "You picking up strays now, Russo. That makes you weak," one shouted. Vincent stepped out calmly, his powerful frame commanding respect even in blindness. "She is under my protection. This ends here." The rivals backed down after heated words, but the tension left everyone shaken. Sarah, waiting inside the penthouse, heard the details from a cautious staff member. Horror and anxiety flooded her. She felt dizzy numbness spreading as she imagined the risks Vincent was taking for her sake. "Why would he do this for someone like me?" she whispered, voice trembling with fear and confusion. The inner turmoil in Sarah's heart grew more intense. She was still at times desperate and powerless, haunted by the extreme poverty that had nearly broken her. Yet now, protected by Vincent's wealth, she experienced overwhelming trust and attachment. The passionate surge of gratitude mixed with shock left her emotionally raw. A once destitute woman suddenly enveloped in safety and care. Tears came quietly in the stillness of her room as she clutched the warm quilt, feeling both unworthy and deeply moved. Vincent sat alone later that night by the